Anyone who reads Natasha Badhwar, as I do, and as clearly many of you do, probably believe they know her. This is actually only the second or third time I think I'm actually meeting her. But I do feel like I know her simply because her life is so out there, right? So we know, for example, that her writing, apart from being very evocative and sensitive, is also very personal. We know that she has 3 daughters. I just asked her what the ages were now, because as you keep reading her book or her columns, those ages keep varying. So I still think that her daughters are still pretty young, etc. And I found out they are now 15, 12,
14 and 12.
14, 12, and 9. Yes.
Nine.
Yeah. And I thought they were much younger. So, but I think everything about Natasha Badhwar's writing is very personal. We know that she has those 3 daughters. We know that they seem to be a lot like her. We know that she's some kind of a super mom, clearly. And we know that she has a husband who's a kind of a shady, shadowy presence somewhere in her life. What is it, I want to begin by asking, that we do not know about you?
You know everything about me.
But there must be things that you keep private, out of it, do you?
Yeah, everything I write, everything that's gone into this book that has come from the columns in Lounge and that had evolved from some of my writings on Twitter and on my blog, all of this is what I wanted to know about myself. All of this was stuff that I wasn't expressing enough in my own life. So I have this public persona, I'm a media professional, I'd worked in television, I'm a certain kind of very loud, raucous, laughing friend, I'm a certain kind of very, difficult daughter, I'm a devoted wife, and all of that is is what I know about me. And beneath the surface is a lot more. And when I first started writing Samar, it was really to discover myself, to uncover the layers, the successful layers, to go beyond the supermom, because under the shell of the supermom, under the cloak of the supermom, was somebody who didn't feel like a supermom, was somebody who felt quite lost and broken. And I began to write primarily to be able to articulate that person, to be able to get in touch with that part of me. And so everything that is part of the column and part of the book now is stuff that I'm also discovering about myself.
And has your family been fine with this? Writing everything about every child and your husband every day?
So I've been mildly surprised at how keen my children have become about the writing. They look for the Lounge on Saturdays, and they'll ask each other, "Did you read it this time? There's something about you." And so the children were not even reading or writing when I first began to write. And, that was in many ways a very safe space. Also, I was writing anonymously in the beginning on my blog. So it was really hidden from everybody except me. And I was very paranoid about it being discovered. So I kept it hidden. I didn't connect it to my email ID even. So that, even if you did a really deep internet search, you could not find Natasha Badhwar and the blog. You could not connect the two. But slowly with time, as it has discovered an audience and as that audience has grown, so has the audience at home also grown. The children have, so they don't read anything I write on my social media. So, my Facebook and my Twitter is still completely out of bounds because they're not on it, and I don't take it home. But they have enjoyed reading this, and they feel proud. And if I tell them, if there's a week when the column is not there, they'll ask me about it. And when I once contemplated for a while that I should do something else, that I should write something else, I should stop writing this, no, Mama. So there's something they also get from reading this column. And to complete the answer, my husband. So I did start with the assumption that when I write about, my angst, my anger, my helplessness, my confusions, it will not be the right thing to do. That my husband will not be comfortable with it. And for the longest time, I didn't show it to him. And for the longest time, even when I began to write in Mint Lounge, he did not appear in it for at least a year or a year and a half. And sometimes he would read it and say, "Where am I?" And I think there was one time when the first time that I actually wrote about a really difficult moment in our marriage when momentarily we had lost our child in a park. And in my panic, in my complete panic, I was blaming him for not having been with me in the way that I expected him to be. And, I wanted to process those feelings later on because I was surprised by that, by the peak of that anger against my husband when I could not find my child. And I wanted to explore that space. And I was really struggling with that piece. My deadline had passed. It had been 6 hours since my deadline. And he saw me sitting with the computer and he said, "What's the problem?" And I said, "This is what I'm writing." And he read it. And he said, "It's fine. It's, just send it." And I've never looked back from there. He's so long as it's honest and so long as it's accurate and so long as they find themselves in it in the way that they also like to see themselves, they're okay.
I just have a feeling that as her daughters are, the eldest is 14, and as they enter their teenage years, they might not be so accepting, perhaps, as they are right now. But I just want to read out something from her book. No, before that, let me tell you the kind of conversations I have at home with my 7-year-old. So the conversations usually go like this. "Appa, can I have a sweet?" "No. Because I didn't have one yesterday." "No. No, let me tell you why I need one." "No, you can't have a sweet." Okay, these are the kind of conversations I endure with my 7-year-old. These are normal conversations, I think, which many of you endure. Now, let me tell you what goes on in the Badhwar household. There is jalebi in the kitchen. There is a little girl in the house, Naseem. She is by my knee now. "Mama, listen," she says, her podgy little hand on her heart. I put my left hand on her heart, my right hand still on my mouse. "Dhak, dhak, dhak, dhak," says Naseem. "What?" I ask, almost whispering. "God likes jalebi," she whispers back. "I just had jalebi and my heart is beating loudly. Listen." What do I do with this moment? Somewhere in here is the meaning of life being handed to me on a platter. My daughter never talks to me like this. How do your daughters talk to you like this?
To be honest, I talk to them like this.
There you go.
So we'll be coming home on a long drive. We live in the suburbs, so we spend a lot of time in traffic, in the car. And I'll look out of the window and I'll say, "Look, the moon is following us." And,
This is impossibly poetic and a very hard act to keep up with.
And if for some reason it works for them, they like the story in it.
So, there are these, all through the book, if you see, there are these little notes of these conversations between Natasha and her daughters. Now, I've always been curious about this, all these years of reading you. How do you record these conversations? Are they all verbatim? And, as a writer who struggles to keep up with a normal person that I'm interviewing, I wonder how on earth do you record all that 3 children are saying, possibly at the same time?
Yeah, so I spend a lot of time with them. And I spend, because we live in the suburb, and that's a very, very conscious decision, we actually moved out of the neighborhood I grew up in. And we moved away from the neighborhood my husband was living in to, outside Delhi. And the evenings are really long, so the afternoons. My husband travels a lot. So we do I do actually spend a lot of time without any adult company, just in the company of children. And it just, something like this happens, and I really, I have this desperation to hold on to that moment. And I have this desire to create something out of that moment, because it's fleeting, because it just touched me so deeply at that moment. And I want to keep it somehow. I want to hold on to it for whatever meaning it might have. And I know I'll forget it. I know I'll forget it because I don't remember anything that's even in the book. And sometimes, I'll read something very old and it'll come back like a memory, because we forget these moments. So I began to write them, and I began to write them first on my blog, and then when they seemed like there was a little bit of humor in them, and I'm a failed stand-up comic, I'm a failed joker. Nobody laughs at my jokes. But I tried them on Facebook. And for some reason, they seem to be very popular. If you stop somebody, if you tell your friend, yesterday my daughter said this to me, it's boring. I don't want to hear what her daughter said. She doesn't want to hear what my daughter said. But somehow on Facebook, you leave it there, and it seems to resonate. And there are times when the children will read something I have written, and they'll say, it has happened exactly like this, but when you write it, it sounds funnier.
But do you have a notebook where you record all of this?
I do have a notebook.
So those notes in the book are genuine records of your life as they went, as it goes by.
Most of it is written on the phone.
Yeah.
The notes in the book are the artistic expression of notes in the phone.
Okay. Now, the thing you should know about Natasha was that she was a camera person, and our lives crossed, though we didn't know it, in some mustard fields, I think in Haryana many years ago, when two 747s crashed into each other over Charki Dadri. And I was there in those fields and suddenly realized that we were walking over dead bodies. And I was reading this book and I realized that Natasha was there as well, because she also was walking over these dead bodies, and it was one of the most horrific experiences that we've had, certainly had in our lives. But from there, she went on to a very interesting career path. Her last full-time job was about 10 years ago as vice president with NDTV, right? And then she took a decision to drop out, leave everything. And the book tells you that she was very professionally fulfilled. She had a very good life, and she dropped all that one day and decided to become a full-time mother. And we are very glad about it, because that led to her columns and that led to this book. We are going to run out of time, and I want you to ask her questions, and I'm sure many of you do. There's one question that's on my mind that I really wanted to ask, is that you said you don't pray, you don't read religious texts or fast. So, is your husband very religious? And for those of you who doesn't know, she's a love jihadi, right? She's a Muslim married to a Hindu, and neither of them has converted. And her daughters, if you read this wonderful book, are always telling people, when people ask, they hear the name and they say, what are you? So they say, we are Hindu and Muslim. And there are a lot of people who say, you cannot be both. They say, that's exactly what we are. So I think these are the part of the things that make this book wonderful. But let me ask you about those experiences of yours, of in modern day India, a Hindu married to a Muslim, and how does that dynamic play out with your children?
Yeah, so, when I met Afzal, I don't think I noticed that he was a Muslim for a while. And he pointed it out to me. He said, it's all too well and all, but, this is, we can't marry each other. And eventually we did. But when he spoke to his family finally about us getting married, his sister, one of his sisters doesn't live in India. So she gets all the news about India from the internet and from the media. And she called, this is 15 years ago. This is before Love Jihad was coined. 15 years ago, she called and she said, there will be riots, people will kill you. And we laughed at her. We were like, where are you getting your news from? You have no clue. India is fine. This is perfectly common. This happens all the time. Nothing of this is going to happen. We live in Delhi. What are you talking about? And this is 2002. Actually, it's the year of the Ahmedabad riots. Sometimes I look back and we were both in Ahmedabad in 2002, in March, April, May, June. And we got married in July. And sometimes I see a connection there. Something hurt, something about India was changing, and we felt that we had to be together and restore it in some way. How does it play out? In the beginning, we only had to deal with our parents, and that was easy. Because he comes to my house and behaves like a Hindu, and I go to his house and behave like a Muslim daughter-in-law. And it means nothing. It just means a costume change. It means sitting for a puja. It means reading the Quran in English. It's like role-playing. It's pretty exciting. It's like being in a play. Because nothing else is expected from us by the parents. But now that the children are growing up, they actually bring home a lot of conversations. So their peer group in the park, in the classroom, points out to them, how can your mother be a Badhwar if you're a Beg? It's not possible. And a lot of very young children actually say you're a Pakistani. The word Muslim and the word Pakistani has become synonymous in the imagination of young minds who are getting most of their information about being Muslim from the media, from television, from a lot of the television debates where you're told to go to Pakistan if you're a Muslim sympathizer. So this is when the conversation has actually come home. There was a time when in one of our children's school, there was no holiday for Eid. And I felt that I had to speak up. I could not let them feel that it was okay to go to school on Eid when actually it meant so much to the family that it was the festival of Eid. So I have, publicly gone and spoken to the principal, had a conversation about her. They come home, they read the newspaper, they read Afzal Guru was hanged, and they want to know because his name is the same as their father's name. And they read about Muslims being terrorists, they hear about it. And everything connects for them with their father because he's okay, he's so cute. Like all young girls think about their father, as you know. Then where is this narrative coming from? So they constantly ask questions, and they often need a reassurance that we're okay, and all this narrative is false, and we can challenge this.
But there is a darker turn that the book takes at the end, where you do question about, where you raise the question of security as they grow up. Do you worry more about that as they grow up? About where you live?
Yeah, so there's a chapter in the book where Muhammad Akhlaq has been lynched less than 5 kilometers away from my home. And before the news came on, via the newspapers and via the internet, we had heard about it. We had heard that a man had been lynched because apparently he had killed a calf, and that it had been a really brutal lynching. My parents are both refugees from Pakistan. Their families are refugees from Pakistan. My mother's family has seen a very, very brutal violence and have lost members of their family while they were coming from Lahore to Amritsar in 1947. We were a young family. I was 12 or 13 years old when 1984 Delhi riots happened. As a professional, one has gone and covered riots. And yet you reassure yourself that this will not happen to you. And then the news comes closer home, and you wonder if there will be a mob in your own street one day looking for a Muslim home, and yours is the house that will get targeted. So it would, it's true. The thought comes, and in a sense, it's a realistic thought. It's also something that one must, in some way, engage with psychologically as well as publicly, because even if it's not my house that's going to get targeted, homes like mine are being targeted every day, and you know, your whole sense of belonging to this country, to this society, gets threatened at that moment. And for me, as a woman, that becomes very important, because I've always kind of struggled with belonging to my primary family. The narrative ki beti hai shadi ho jayegi is something that I've heard since I was 2 years old. And I don't want, you know, I want the children to be rooted in their own family, in their own country, in their own society. And to that extent, it becomes important to have that conversation.
So on that not so happy note, let me end and open it up for questions.
It was really wonderful hearing from you. I'd just like to ask you a personal question. Have your children ever faced bullying because of the family background?
Oh, all children face a lot of bullying these days. We thought we lived in times that were harsher, that we were, our parents were tougher on us, and our schools were not so liberal. But I'm amazed at how much bullying goes on in schools. Have they been bullied for being young Muslim women? Not yet. Is there generally an atmosphere where young people are bullying each other a lot? Yes, there is.
Any other question?
Might be a bit of an unfair question. Natasha, I love your writing. I read it a
Thank
lot.
you.
But that's 50% of why I'm here. The 50% is I also love your writing, Samar, and I'm a big fan of yours. So I was wondering, since it is about personal writing and both of you are on the same platform, could you talk a little bit about your own story?
I wanted to ask this question as well, Samar. There's so much writing, Samar, that you do as a journalist. But you also have that one column in which you write about yourself as the man at home, as the person who loves to cook for his wife and child, as the father. What do you get from it? What does it give you?
So this session is not about me, so I'm not going to answer that. And my wife is sitting right here. This is a very dangerous question, but I'll be happy to talk later on. Other questions?
Any other question?
Hi, Natasha. My neighbor is a very good friend of mine, and both of us love reading your articles. She has 2 boys, and I have 2 girls. Both of us are equally careful about what we say to them, how we say it to them, and the safety of the children is for her as well as for me. So just wanted to ask you that we want our children to be very sensitive to whatever's happening around them. We want them to do the right thing, which is what we also always try to do. But also we want them to be able to look out for themselves. And we want them to be a little bit hardened as well, to accept that bad things will happen in their lives, while always striving for the good things and supporting all the good things and doing more good. But also accept that there will be things that will pass through their fingers. So just wanted to know how you deal with that in your house. I think it was last Saturday that you wrote about, how your middle daughter or your eldest one, you just, let her stay
The middle
at home.
daughter, yeah.
And that was fine. I've done that with my older one as well. She just says, I don't want to go to school. I'm just not feeling good in my heart. I'm like, okay, that's fine. But I need her to know that there will be a time when she will have to go to school. Even, she has to face that, whatever it is that's bothering her. So just wanted to know what you feel about that. Thank you.
This is, it's a fantastic question because it's a question that one deals with as a parent, negotiates as a parent every day, every single day. And of course, the common narrative is we need to toughen them up. We need to prepare them now to face the real world, and also the fear that if we mollycoddle them too much, then this sense of entitlement that children develop, where they feel that they must get everything because of their privilege and that they don't have to work hard to earn it. So we're always trying to find that balance. But one of the lessons I've learned is that we don't question established hierarchies enough, even as adults. So this idea that you will have to do what your boss says is something that my father gave to me, and I took it to work with me. And over the years, as you grow as an adult, you learn that that's not the only binary that is true, that you will be rewarded for asking questions, you will be rewarded for resisting, you will be rewarded for innovating as well. And that when there are situations that kind of demand that you as an individual cannot stand up to a system and therefore must accede to it, you can often leave and find another system or another institution or create one yourself. So this hierarchy between you're a nobody or you're just an individual who has to learn how to get along with those who are more powerful than you or fit into institutions and organizations and job roles is something that I'm learning to question as an adult. And I'm learning to teach myself. I often have to tell myself, you are as important as your boss. That at some point you grow out of the shadow of those that have traditionally dominated you. And I feel that that's something that we don't give our children enough. So if I am saying, teaching myself to let my daughter stay at home when she's having a panic attack at the thought of going to school, in a way I am also giving her the tools to be able to make a choice that works for her. Why do we have to accept that if her attendance is low, she will not, it will be a very bad thing? Why can we not question that if you as an institution are unable to meet her emotional needs at this moment, she has the choice to be able to find a safe space temporarily. And a lot of us as adults also need to learn that lesson, that we need to protect ourselves, we need to assert ourselves more than we do. And that's been a journey in parenting for me as well. And that's also why on regular intervals I will write about fights between my husband and me because, or disagreements and arguments between him and me, because they need to see that, the mother, the woman in the family can be as assertive and can have as much of a point as the father.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.